I'm joined by Pete Nash. We did an interview about his walking football, but at the same time I really knew there's another interview in here when he was talking about his day job. And if you're a Sun newspaper reader, Striker is
Striker is the comic strip.
That's the comic strip.
Yes.
You are the man for what, 35 odd years?
For 35 years, yeah.
And he's here. He's living on the Isle of Man. I never knew. So come on, let's have the story. What brings you here, first of all? And then we'll get down to the ins and outs of the actual character.
Well, it was 2006 I came to the Isle of Man from Kent. And I think there were various reasons. There was no one reason, but we had two children, and both of them were either side of the 11 plus exam. One had passed and one had failed, and so obviously with the one who failed, she went to grammar school, and Adam who didn't, he he found that to go to a private school, for instance, he still would have had to have sat an entrance exam. So we came here. King William School didn't have an entrance exam. So we moved here largely for that. Tax reasons, yeah, everything plays a part, and the island itself is just beautiful, so much space.
Your job, of course, making the cartoons, you can do anywhere. You didn't go into the office in London, I guess. You just do it from home, do you?
Yeah. Well, when I started it, I was working at the Sun then as a journalist, but I'd always had an affinity for comics and that kind of fiction. And I was looking at the strips that would come from some of the Spanish artists, because comic strips in the newspapers were a big deal in the 80s, not so much now. And I'd see the big strips that would come in the full size, and I thought I would love to do something like that. So it was a question of what kind of theme, and it wasn't that I was just mad on football, but I wanted to try and create something that hadn't been in the newspapers. And Roy the Rovers, when it was on its last legs then, it was still very much a kind of kids comic strip. So I thought if I did a football strip that was aimed at adults, then it may have a chance of success. And I showed it to the editor, Kelvin Mackenzie.
Oh, that era.
That Kelvin, yeah, who was
tough man.
He looked at it, and I thought for a minute he just was going to laugh me out of his office. And then he said, "We'll give it a go," because the drawings were very rough in those days, and I was writing it and drawing it then. But in 2000, it switched to, instead of being drawn, it was created in 3D software. So it's gone through a lot of changes.
And do you do all that as well yourself? Or?
I did, and I trained some people up. So I've got a very good artist in Wolverhampton who does most of the 3D work. But I think what's happened now is that after 35 years, you find that, for one thing, there isn't a story you haven't done. That every conceivable story.
You have written all those stories over 35 years.
All of those stories have been done, yeah. And you find yourself racking your brain now to come up with a new story. So I feel, and also the money that newspapers pay for comic strips now are a lot less. So you have to look at maybe doing something different, reinventing Striker. And I think the time has come to try and tell the Striker story in the comic strip. Try and tell it as a TV series. So I'm going to be looking at writing a Striker novel in the first instance, and a screenplay. And hopefully there'll be some production companies or some of the networks, because they're all looking for new content now. That's how everything's changed from comic strips now to putting it on TV. So hopefully it'll be reinvented for the big or small screen, but there's nothing definite on that yet. So
like a Roy the Rovers, everyone knows that. Striker is for another generation. 35 years of it, people have grown up with Striker. I mean, you must be amazing. I mean, that's an incredible amount of time to write about one fictional team. I mean, I've never seen it because I don't find newspaper.
Well, that's right. And a lot of people now who read Striker don't buy the Sun either, because, as you say, a lot of people are not buying newspapers. Yeah. So we do with Striker. I brought out the whole stories from start to finish. We're bringing them out in a series of books, so people now who've never read the Sun can see Striker. And I get fan mail from people saying, "I've never seen Striker, I just found it last year." But then also there are people who've followed it from day one. So they're now sort of 60 years old, and they started reading it when they were 25.
Now, you said before we came on that it hasn't always been smooth sailing with the Sun. I don't know what you mean by that. You had your moments with them, have you?
Yes, it was great when it started off. The first 15 years were fantastic. The Sun would get behind it, they'd promote it. And then a lot of the other newspapers wanted to take Striker. So the Sun, in order to keep it, had to pay more money. Yeah. And I think what happened was, as a result of paying probably more money than they would like to have done, they tried to claim ownership of the intellectual property rights in Striker. And that took a lot of time and money to prove that, no, they didn't own it, that I did. But I think it was the point of no return, and the relationship was never the same after that. There were a series of fallouts over creative issues. They tried to censor some of the storylines, saying that they wanted Striker to be more kid-friendly rather than for the adults who really were following it. And after a while, I thought, well, I'm going to have to leave the Sun, and I started up a weekly comic back in 2003. Which I used the equity in my house to fund that, and we managed to go for about 2 years, but that was so difficult. And then the Sun came back and said, look, if you bring Striker back to the paper, we won't claim ownership, it'll all be fantastic. So we went back to the Sun. It was okay, but it just wasn't. And I think there comes a time when you have to say, after 35 years, which is a heck of a long time, has it now run its course and do something else?
And you are working on finishing it now then? It's still going at the moment? But
yes, it's still going at the moment, and the final story is due to finish actually next Friday. And after that I'm going to be working on the novel and the screenplay. And I'm going to tell the story that's been in the comic strip, so the Striker story, which involves effectively a footballer who was a Premier League footballer but never really tasted the glory. He gets a chance to come back and have a shot at the big time by becoming player-manager of a fictitious club called Warbury Warriors. And the person who's wooed him back, the owner of Warbury Warriors, is a big fat northerner called Eric Openshaw, who's married to a trophy wife. And he's told everybody he's got a lot more money than he actually has.
That's right.
But he makes a reckless £1 million bet with a rival businessman that he can take Warbury to the Premier League in successive seasons, which he instantly regrets when he wakes up in the morning. But of course the bet's been made, so Nick Jarvis, the hero of the strip, has to try and bring Warbury to the Premier League.
There's so much. Are you looking for investors? You out there? Do you want to put your number out, or do you people looking to make a film with you?
Well, one of the great things about the Isle of Man is that there's a lot of creative people, both involved in the film industry and in writing. So it would be fantastic to collaborate with anybody in the Isle of Man, first of all, who thinks that they might be able to help. But I'm also optimistic because where comic strips now are not as popular as they were in the 80s, the great thing is that there are people like Netflix, there's Apple TV, Amazon, so many people now are looking for content. Yeah. And I think
they've got big wallets as well.
Yeah, they have, and Netflix particularly will throw big money at it. So if we can get the actual tone of Striker right, because it wouldn't work if it was done exactly the same way as a cartoon strip, but if we can keep the humour, if we can keep the drama that was in Striker and translate that into a screenplay, and if the production company or Netflix or someone can pick it up, then
how do they get hold of you?
Could happen. How can they get hold of me? If they email me pete.nash@live.co.uk.
Come back and tell us how it all goes, right?
I will do. Thanks a lot, Paul. Thank you.